Hello, my name is Il Changi, and I'm Senior Research Coordinator at United Nations Research Institute for Social Development, or UNRISD. I'm in charge of the Alternative Economies for Transformation program. I'm very happy to have an opportunity to talk with you today at capacity building of social and solidarity ecosystem of Asian countries, organized by Global Civic Sharing in partnership with GCEP and UNRISD. For those who are not familiar with UNRISD, I will briefly explain about UNRISD and its research and activities on the social and solidarity economy. UNRISD was established in 1963 as an autonomous research institute within the UN system at the General Assembly. The mandate of UNRISD is doing research relevant to policy, cutting-edge research on social development that is pertinent to the work of the United Nations Secretariat, regional commissions, and specialized agencies and national institutions. Since the early 2010s, UNRISD has been designing and implementing various research projects on social and solidarity economy, or SSE. We have published more than 200 research papers, briefs, and reports on various aspects of social and solidarity economy. And we have organized more than 5 international events for SSE scholars and practitioners from different parts of the world. For instance, in 2013, UNRISD, in collaboration with the ILO, organized the first UN conference on SSE.
The solidarity and social economy has become really a worldwide movement.
How to guarantee the reproduction and development of life with dignity for all.
We believe in the importance of connecting researchers from different countries and regions to provide a platform for bringing together diverse viewpoints, critical research, and often marginalized voices.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to follow up and play a role in translating the outcomes of this conference into research, into policy, and into action to achieve better strategies and interventions.
And in the same year, UNRISD, together with UN agencies, organized the UN Interagency Task Force on Social and Solidarity Economy. And in 2019, UN Task Force organized the first international conference on SSE, inviting scholars, practitioners, government delegates, and United Nations agencies staffs.
When the UN Task Force for Social Solidarity Economy was created in 2013 as a multilateral platform of all stakeholders to create more awareness on the value and potential of social solidarity economy within the UN system, it is interesting to note that at the very same month and year of 2013, many of local government and social solidarity economy networks, expert and national international organizations engaged in promoting social solidarity economy from different regions have also gathered in Seoul, adopting the Seoul Declaration to continue knowledge sharing on good practices of public policy to support social solidarity economy.
The challenge that we need to accept and recognize is that the social and solidarity economy has got a key role to play, and we all recognize that here, but it is not adequately positioned in the world economy to make the impact that it can and should be making. And that is the challenge that we've got to take out here and make sure it happens.
The social and solidarity economy re-embeds economics in the real world. That is, economic activity that takes place within societies and for people, and reflects common values of cooperation, respect, democratic participation, and fairness.
If we take an edition of agroecology, SSE, and cooperativism, this gives us sustainable production and consumption and livelihoods, which in turn leads to peaceful societies.
These debates are very timely because they happen in a global context in which there are a wealth of methodologies and tools which make sometimes difficult for social economy organizations to navigate into this ocean.
As effective in implementing the SDGs, particularly through the regeneration of local assets, allowing people to experience sustainable development by participating in concrete initiatives.
This is a good opportunity for us to kind of review all those processes or steps we've taken to reach this moment. What should be the next steps we have to take to move forward?
We have Article 45 of the Italian.
You can see this figure. This is the figure during the
Currently, UN Interagency Task Force has 18 UN agency members and 14 international organizations working on SSE as observers. Since 2015, UNRISD research has particularly focused on the relationship between SSE and the SDGs. In terms of its research focus, UNRISD research on SSE can be divided into two categories. The first category can be described as a research on the nature, potential, and dynamics of SSE in the context of the SDGs. The second category is the research on the elements of policy and institutional environment for SSE, which we call SSE ecosystem. The researches belonging to the first category deal with the definition of SSE, concepts associated with SSE, and the roles and functions of SSE in different contexts. This research belonging to the first category provides the basis of the guidelines we are going to learn together, and I'm going to talk about key concepts and issues drawn from this research. First issue I want to talk about is the concept. Social and solidarity economy, the concept we use, is an umbrella concept including diverse forms of economic activities and relations. As you know, depending on your perspective, the definition and the scope of SSE can be different. UNRISD research has identified common elements and values shared by diverse understandings. The first common element is the prioritization of social and other objectives such as environmental and cultural objectives over profit motives. Our economic activities and relations have been dominated by the liberal or neoliberal economic assumptions. According to these economic assumptions, we, humans, are a kind of machine to calculate economic benefits. According to these assumptions, we think and behave in order to maximize economic benefits. And the capitalist economic activities and relations composed of these economic benefit maximizing individuals would have markets in which all of us pursue the maximization of profits. And the conclusion propagated by liberal or neoliberal economic thinking is that the more market, the more well-being. We can easily notice that these assumptions and conclusions have so many lies. Firstly, we are not just a calculator to calculate economic benefits only. We do think and behave in accordance with our self-interest. But that self-interest is not always associated with economic benefits. And the non-economic interests and values such as friendship, love, good cause, justice, and solidarity also make us think and move even if our actions based on these values incur economic costs. We all know this, But when it comes to understanding economics or economy, or organizing economic activities and relations, many people indoctrinated by liberal and neoliberal ideology feel obliged to follow the principle of profit maximization. SSE is trying to reject this dominance of profit maximization principle and mainstreaming non-profit objectives in our economic activities and relations. Second element we found as a common element of SSE is its pursuit of democracy within and between entities. Governance arrangements within the SSE organizations and enterprises are less hierarchical and more democratic when the governance structure is not based on the size of shares or equities. Within this democratic governance structure, SSE promotes more equitable patterns of income or profit distribution. And this democratic governance structure and more equitable patterns of income and profit distribution politically and economically empower low-income and vulnerable groups, which contributes to enhancing economic and political democracy in society. In particular, the role of SSE organizations and enterprises for informal economy workers in enhancing democracy in society is significant, since they help informal economy workers such as street vendors, domestic workers, waste pickers, and others to collectively defend their interests. Third element shared by all SSE organizations and enterprises is all the SSE organizations and enterprises are guided by non-economic principles and practices such as cooperation, solidarity, ethics, and democratic self-management. None of SSE organizations and enterprises are guided by principles such as growth or productivity increase. They are important issues, but not the core principles and practices that move organizations away from principles of cooperation, solidarity, ethics, and democracy. With these characteristics, SSE organizations and enterprises contribute to achieving multiple SDGs. For instance, the 2017 UNRISD GSEP Joint Research on Seoul, Republic of Korea examined the contributions of 250 certified social economy entities to achieving the SDGs. From this research, we found, first, all the SSE organizations aim to address multiple SDGs associated with social and environmental dimensions, as well as economic dimension. And secondly, institutional and policy ecosystem which has been developed in tandem with grassroots level SSE initiatives played a significant role in increasing the number of SSE organizations and enterprises which contributed to achieving multiple SDGs. This second finding leads us to the second category of UNRISD research on SSE, that is, research on SSE ecosystem. Ecosystem is a terminology mainly used in the scientific study of nature. According to this discipline, an ecosystem is a physically defined environment made up of two inseparable components. The first is the biotope, which is a particular physical environment with specific physical characteristics such as the climate, temperature, humidity, and concentration of nutrients. The other is the biosynosis, which is a set of living organisms such as animals, plants, or microorganisms that are in constant interaction and interdependence. In the field of policy study, ecosystem is understood as the one composed of four inseparable components in policy design, implementation and monitoring, and evaluation processes. Those four core elements are policy stakeholders, policy process, institutions, and policies. UNRISD research has focused on these four elements constituting SSE ecosystem. Who are the stakeholders who gain or lose through the outcomes of policies? What institutions and policies are needed to promote SSE organizations and enterprises? What kind of benefits and loss stakeholders would have from which policies and institutions? How should those institutions and policies for SSE be designed and implemented? We have done various research to provide answers to these questions, and one of those researches is the guidelines for local governments on policies for social and solidarity economy. For the introduction of the guidelines, I'd like to invite my friend Nunchi. Nunchi has a great interest in UNRISD research and observed the whole process of this research project from the beginning. Nunchi, are you there? Floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nunchi Bakdan. Today, I am going to introduce the guidelines for local governments on policies for social and solidarity economy, which was produced by United Nations Research Institute for Social Development, or UNRISD, in collaboration with Global Social Economy Forum, or GSIF. The social and solidarity economy, or SSE, refers to organizations and enterprises with social and, often environmental objectives, guided by principles and practices of cooperation, solidarity and democratic self-management.
UNRISD and GSIF have been promoting SSE over the last decade.
But they had a big concern.
It was how to promote SSE and help it to contribute to achieving the SDGs at the local level.
So they decided to co-produce guidelines on policies to promote SSE in local context, which is particularly helpful to local policymakers and practitioners at the local level.
After 1.5 years research, the project, entitled Promoting SSE Through Public Policies, has produced case studies on 7 cities such as Barcelona, Spain, Dakar, Senegal,
Durban, South Africa, Liverpool, the UK, Mexico City, Mexico, Montreal, Canada, and Seoul, Republic of Korea.
In addition to these 7 case studies, finally, this guidelines for local governments on policies for social and solidarity economy was published in January 2021.
The guidelines have 10 chapters including introduction.
9 chapters are dealing with core themes of SSE ecosystem.
They are, Chapter 2 Co-construction of public policy for SSE, Chapter 3 Legal frameworks for SSE, Chapter 4 Mainstreaming SSE in development plans, Chapter 5 Supporting organizations for SSE, Chapter 6 Capacity building for SSE, Chapter 7 Access to finance for SSE, Chapter 8 Access to markets for SSE, Chapter 9 Awareness raising and advocacy for SSE, and finally, Chapter 10 Mapping of SSE, research and data collection. All the chapters begin with an introduction explaining the topic and highlighting its importance and implications for SSE. The subsequent sections delve into the details associated with the subject matter of the chapter, which provide policymakers with the scope, substance and relevant policy options related to existing issues or shortcomings in policies. The guidance section of each chapter provides a checklist that policymakers can use to establish or strengthen policies and institutions to promote SSE.
This guidance section offers an opportunity for a very interesting journey of policy making. In the form of flowchart questions,
it guides readers to relevant information.
You don't have to have correct answers to the questions.
The questions are designed to draw out respondents' perceptions and help them to strategically investigate the contexts they are working in. Following the questions of the flowchart, they can establish what processes are needed to improve current policies and institutions for SSE, communicate with others, document institutions and policies in question and help plan actions. For instance, the guidance section on developing SSE legislative frameworks provides a practical checklist to policymakers of subnational governments who are committed to initiating or strengthening existing laws promoting SSE and policy frameworks, in a spirit of co-construction with SSE stakeholders and other relevant actors.
It has 2 sub-guidance sections for those who initiate the process of developing SSE legislative frameworks and those who improve existing legal frameworks.
The authors of the guidelines, Hamish Jenkins, Ilchong Yi, Samuel Brulesauer and Karmani Chadha, recommend this guideline as training material for multi-stakeholder group exercises. They are very much confident that collective exercise to follow the questions of the flowchart in guidance section will create spaces where participants can exchange knowledge, experience and views on institutions, policies and processes and deepen their understanding about how to create and strengthen as SSE ecosystem.
You can download all the papers and guidelines on the project webpage of Promoting SSE through Public Policies at UNRISD's website www.unrisd.org. That is all from me. Thank you for listening.
Everyone, bye for now. Bye-bye.
This presentation is made by me, Nuchi Baekdan,
together with Chong Film.
Thank you, Nunchi. As Nunchi mentioned, this guideline was produced out of the UNRISD and GSEP's concern, that is, how to promote SSE at the local level. When you think about various ways to promote SSE at the local level, what came to our minds first was the importance of public policies, not just public policies, but good public policies. The importance of good public policies for the promotion of SSE cannot be denied by anybody. Whether policies are good or not can be determined in at least 5 dimensions. They are process, inputs and resources, outcomes, relations with other policies, and politics. In the dimension of process, good policies have a co-construction process of designing and implementing policies. In this co-construction process, all the stakeholders who are affected by policy problems and policies can meaningfully participate in decision-making as partners and co-creators. In the case of SSE, policymakers, SSE practitioners, researchers, and all those concerned about SSE get together to identify problems, put them into policy agenda, and design and implement policies to address those policy problems. Policies designed and implemented through co-construction process are more likely to produce good outcomes. These good outcomes are the second element, making policies good. One tricky issue is that there are too many unexpected factors which make policy results good or bad. Sometimes policies made by an excellent co-construction process may not produce good results because of unexpected factors which are beyond the control of those participating in the co-construction process, such as natural disasters, global economic crisis, or, of course, pandemics like COVID-19. Here, the importance of inputs and resources comes in. If the substance of policies is based on the inputs, resource, tools, and knowledge, which strengthen the values and principles of SSE, we can say policies have good inputs and resources. As you know, these values and principles of SSE include prioritization of social and environmental objectives, democratic self-management, and solidarity within and beyond organizations. When policies have inputs and resources based on these values and principles, designing and implementing processes of those policies can make stakeholders of SSE more innovative and creative in addressing crisis situations. They can establish stronger mechanisms to mitigate the negative impacts of unexpected crises. They can create more effective mechanisms to build back better. In a way, we can say that inputs and resources of policies based on SSE values and principles are the most essential elements constituting our efforts to build forward better in the context of crisis. Relations with policies are the fourth dimension of policy assessment. Policies for SSE should be aligned with policies for public sector economy and for-profit sector. That means policies for SSE should be designed and implemented in the way to create synergies with other policies. For instance, if conflicts between policies for SSE and policies for for-profit sector are serious enough to significantly undermine whole economy, the policies would not be good for both SSE and for-profit sectors. If SSE policies are designed and implemented without reflecting what is going on in public sector economy, such as public procurement, SSE policies may not fully maximize the potential of SSE sector either. In this sense, policies for other sectors should be also designed and implemented in the way to promote SSE. Therefore, to promote SSE, we need an integrated approach across the sectors. Politics is the last dimension where we can assess the quality of policies. Good politics provides an essential environment for good policies. From the perspective of making good policies, good politics means political environment in which all the stakeholders deliberate and make policies based on bipartisanship. Some people will say, well, there are also empirical cases where results of policies are very good, even though those policies are designed and implemented unilaterally in a very much polarized politics. But we have to remember, in a democratic society, power changes always take place. And in the polarized political context, backlash after power changes can destroy policies which have produced good results only because they are established unilaterally by political rivals. Politics without reflecting the voices of political minority or politics excluding a certain group of people cannot make their policies sustainable. Those who want to make good policies should always pay attention to how to make contributions to inclusive and deliberative democracy in which consensus making as well as majority rule is central to this decision making. There are not many public policies which are good in all dimensions. Some of them are very good in terms of process, while others are good in terms of outcomes. That is why we don't have to import a certain policy tool from one place to another. We just learn lessons and gain insights from policy experiences in different parts of the world. The development trajectories of public policies for SSE are diverse. They are either bottom-up or top-down. Sometimes both top-down and bottom-up processes go hand in hand and create interesting synergies during the policy-making processes. Whether it is top-down or bottom-up is less important than whether the process moves towards co-construction or not. Although bottom-up process is more likely to move towards co-construction process, the bottom-up process does not always guarantee good inputs and resources, good outcomes, and good politics. Important issue is how to identify key drivers of producing good policies in various experiences of diverse trajectories of policy development. Various cases introduced in the guidelines show diverse experiences in making good policies and various trajectories of public policy development for SSE. I understand this year, this capacity workshop will deal with 4 important areas of SSE ecosystem, which are co-construction of public policies, legal frameworks for SSE, mainstreaming SSE in development plans, and supporting organizations for SSE. These areas correspond to chapters 2, 3, 4, and 5 of our guidelines. In the guidelines, we also deal with important areas such as capacity building, access to finance, access to markets, awareness raising and advocacy, and mapping of SSE research and data collection. They are corresponding to chapters 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. I heard that these chapters will be discussed next year, but it does not mean that you should not look at these chapters 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. I rather encourage you to read all these chapters since they are all interconnected with each other, and sometimes you cannot have solutions when you just focus on chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 and ignore chapters 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Guidelines has a structure like a dictionary. When you have a question and doubt about a certain issue, you will be asked to look for answers in different parts of the guidelines. So when you have some questions about the issues of the chapters 2, 3, 4, and 5, you may be asked to look for answers in chapters 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. In addition, there are many interesting features in the guidelines. Firstly, we had a series of interviews with policymakers of different countries to identify important issues and areas of policies for SSE when we made this guideline. In a way, the guidelines itself is based on co-construction approach, and therefore it was written from the perspective of policymakers who are willing to promote SSE in their local areas. Secondly, although the guidelines dealing with complex policies and institutions, it has been written in plain and simple languages to help policymakers to understand the substance easily. Thirdly, the 10 chapters of the guidelines cover all the important dimensions of SSE ecosystem and explains the bolts and nuts of SSE ecosystem. Finally, each chapter, except for introduction chapter, has flowchart system of questions and answers, which will guide users to relevant information. Then let's learn how to use this guidance section, including questions and relevant information. As I mentioned, every chapter of guidelines has guidance section composed of questions which will guide you to explore necessary knowledge and information related to the issues you want to know more about. When you follow the questions, You don't have to worry about whether you have the right answer to that question. If you think your answer is no, you can go to the relevant parts indicated by the guidance question and find out information on the cases of different cities to draw lessons. When it is not clear whether your answer is yes, please choose no as your answer, since you can get your ideas and thoughts on the issue much clearer by checking and reading relevant parts indicated by guidance questions. If you think your answer is yes, you just share your cases with others and move on to the next question. Here is one example related to Chapter 2 co-construction, which is on the page 10 in English guidelines. The first question is whether your local government has made a significant level of policy commitment to promote SSE in your areas. If you think your local government does not have that kind of commitment, you are supposed to choose no as your answer and look for information on what local government should do. And guidance question advises you to look for the information in Chapter 3, Legal Frameworks for SSE, and Chapter 4, Mainstreaming SSE in Development Plans specifically. Although I encourage you to read all of Chapter 3 and Chapter 4, if you don't have much time to read them all, you can refer to the most relevant parts to your question. The most relevant parts would be Chapter 3, page 12, paragraphs 2 and 3, and Chapter 4, page 19, paragraph 3. In the guidelines, there is not this kind of detailed information, but I think the facilitators of this workshop would guide you to the most relevant parts. And if you think your answer is yes, you can articulate the reasons why you think there is a significant level of commitment your local government has. You can write a brief memo or note for sharing, while other participants who say no as their answers check the relevant parts. Then let's go to these parts of the guidelines as guidance questions suggested. The Chapter 3, page 12, let's enlarge a little bit, paragraph 2 and paragraph 3. Chapter 3, page 12, paragraph 2, this one, provides you with information on why it is important to have a co-construction process. And it says, in the context of co-construction, we can say there is a significant level of local government's commitment to promoting SSE only when there is a co-construction mechanism in legislation process. Let's read the kind of most relevant part. National laws on SSE are not always the first in the sequence of legislation. Depending on political and institutional context, laws on SSE can be adopted at the subnational level, sometimes as precursors to national level legislative action. It would, in fact, appear that there are two main trajectories for the adoption of SSE legal frameworks. And this part is very important. No matter what the sequence is, co-construction with the full involvement of the SSE movement should be central to legislative actions. Legislation deliberated and designed by governments without involving SSE stakeholders is possible, but presents a higher risk of failure. Meaningful and continuous engagement with SSE OEs and a wide range of powerful as well as more marginalized stakeholders in the elaboration and implementation of law and policy is the best protection against failure. And paragraph 3, this one, explains why it is important to have co-construction mechanism in legislation process. It says, SSE legislation without co-construction with the SSE actors tends to produce negative impacts on SSE, including excessive control by public bodies that may jeopardize the autonomy of SSE entities, overly restrictive legal frameworks which can stifle flexibility in recognition of evolving organizational forms and innovative approaches, isomorphism, whereby an SSE entity moves away from its founding principles to act more like a traditional private sector enterprises, and instrumentalization of SSE as a means to promote the neoliberal agenda of reducing state responsibilities with respect to social and environmental prerogatives. So when the participants who have no as their answers finish their reading of the relevant parts, and the participants who have yes as their answers finish the summary of the reasons why they think their local government have a significant level of commitment to the promotion of SSE, all the participants share what they know and what they think about the local government's commitment. Depending on the legal structure and conditions, some countries' local governments may not have a legal authority to establish laws. In that case, you can question yourself whether there is a co-construction mechanism for policy-making process instead of a legislative process at the local government level. And guidance question also asked you to look for chapter 4, page 19, paragraph 3, when you have no as your answer. Let's look at chapter 4, page 19, and paragraph 3. Chapter 4, page 19, paragraph 1, 2, 3. This part provides you with information on the policy options which can be considered government commitments to promote SSE. Let's read this relevant part a little bit. Irrespective of which specific sectors are given priority, policies and programs to realize the objective of development plans through the promotion of SSE may include the following issues. A well-coordinated governance mechanism based on co-construction. As appropriate, inclusion of the promotion of an adequate legal framework for SSE. Capacity building and training services. Access to finance, access to public markets and private markets, communications, advocacy and awareness raising, and data collection, monitoring and evaluation. And again, after reading this relevant part, those who have no as their answer, you can share what you learned from this part. And those who have yes as their answer can check how many policies and programs in this list their local governments have. Through this exercise, such as checking and reading the relevant parts and sharing your observations on your local governments, you will know what local government actions would be needed to be considered to have a significant level of policy commitment to promote SSE, and understand why co-construction is central to these actions. And then everybody can move on to the next question. And the next question is whether your local government is willing to work across its sectoral and institutional boundaries. If you think your local government is not willing to work across its sectoral and institutional boundaries, you are supposed to go to Chapter 4, page 19, and paragraph 5, which continues until page 20. And you will learn different ways local government can work across its sectoral and institutional boundaries, such as relying on existing ministry, through a public agency, or participating in development plan design. Then, shall we check the relevant parts? Chapter 4, page 19, and paragraph 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which continues until page 20. Let's read a little bit. Local government's engagement in a coordination process of administrative or supervisory authorities at the national and subnational levels is crucial to integrating and mainstreaming SSE in development plans or strategies. Local governments can participate in such process of coordination through three main channels, and explains about three channels local government can use to participate in such process of coordination. First here, second here, and third here. And if your answer is yes, you can share your stories about how your local government is willing to work or actually works with other sectors and ministries. And then you can move on to the next questions until the end of the guidance section. As you may have already noticed, these guidance questions do not provide tailor-made answers to your specific question. They are designed to play a role of policy guide, which can help you to reflect your own policy system, share your knowledge and information, and consult other policymakers to learn lessons and gain insights. You will do this exercise in the following sessions dealing with chapters 2, 3, 4, and 5 in this course. If you are accustomed to this way of following the guidance questions, you can also play a game called SSE Policy Hunt. Since we are doing online course like this, we cannot do this game this year, but I hope next year, if we can do offline course, we can play this interesting game which will invite us to an interesting journey to explore the world of SSE policies and institutions. One of the most dangerous things in international development cooperation is, I think, the transfer of single institution from one place to another. When we learn a policy or program from other countries, we need to pay attention to the historical, political, economic, natural, and cultural context where that policy or program was developed. And then we need to learn the lessons, not copy and install that single policy or institution. Therefore, in these guidelines, the information on other countries' cases is not the tailor-made answer, but the reference from which you have to draw the lessons to come up with your own ideas for solutions. And you discuss these ideas with other participants. And then you go back home with those ideas and discuss with all the stakeholders to establish your own policies and institutions for your country and society. We have just started kind of long journey of 2 weeks. I hope you can enjoy this journey. I'm very sorry I cannot be with you today live, but after this lecture, I'll be with you to discuss all those questions you have and possibly discuss some solutions or ideas about solutions. Thank you very much.